Welcome to the Hangout of the American School Counselor Association. I'm Richard Wong, the Executive Director of the American School Counselor Association, and today I'm hanging out with Fredi Lajvardi, a science teacher at Carl Hayden Community High School in Phoenix, and the subject of the book Spare Parts by Joshua Davis and the movie of the same name. Welcome, Fredi.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, thanks. Appreciate you spending some time with us. Um, Spare Parts is the story of four teenagers and their very unlikely interest in robotics. Tell us how the robotics team started at Carl Hayden.
Well, my fellow teacher, Alan Cameron, and myself, we wanted to show kids that you could have fun with math and science, that it wasn't just, what you see in the textbook, because we saw that it was kind of dry and people weren't interested, and we thought that's unfortunate. So we wanted to basically have fun with science after school so that kids can see what it can do, and it can actually solve problems. It's very practical, very useful in your life and that type of thing. So that was our main purpose of starting this. We weren't having any grandiose plans of any competitions at that time. We just wanted to play with kids after school using math and science.
Well, tell us about Carl Hayden. It has a somewhat challenging student population, doesn't it?
Yeah, Carl Hayden is a Title I school. Pretty much all the kids that graduate are the first in their family to graduate from high school. Most of the kids qualify for federally assisted lunch programs. The student population is over 90% Hispanic and low socioeconomic status. So if you think of a typical inner city school with the inner city school problems, we fit the bill.
Mm-hmm. And so you started your team in 2001, 2002, right around there?
Yeah, that's when we didn't necessarily call it a team at that time. It was a group. We didn't know we were forming a team until later. But yeah, that's about when we started doing that.
Mm-hmm. And by 2003, you had actually started to scale back. You had two young sons then. Both had been diagnosed with autism and Asperger's. So you're really trying to spend more time at home with them.
Yeah, the younger one especially was affected. His language almost completely disappeared, and so my wife and I both thought that I'd need to spend more time at home helping her out with the kids and whatnot. So because we didn't know what was going to be involved in taking care of the kids, and so we thought it was better that any free time I had, I would come and help out. So yeah, we had to scale back.
Mm-hmm. So what happened in 2003 then? 2003 to 2004?
Well, things had stabilized a little bit at home. We understood more what we were getting into with autism. The older kid was hardly diagnosable, so he's pretty much gotten out of it, but it took a little while. But the younger one is still affected. So it was decided that I would be able to go back into robotics because it was a growing program, and the kids in the program were getting more and more attention from colleges and things like that. So my wife and I felt it was a good way for me to spend some of my free time after school was to help more kids get into college.
Mm-hmm. And when the students that were profiled in the book came into your life, really, did you see right away that they had promise?
Oh yeah, I mean, Kristen was just one of those kids that pretty much learned most of the stuff either online or through books. And so Oscar was a born leader, and he wanted to find a way to go to college and make a life for himself. So we saw that there was a high incentive to want to go on for further education after high school. Lorenzo, on the other hand, was a little bit of a challenge because he had so many other things involved in his life, and academically he just wasn't up to snuff. His freshman year he wasted a lot of time, so it would take a lot more work to get him in the college track. Luis just wasn't super ambitious for school. He was more interested in just going straight to the workforce. So it's kind of, we had half and half, if you want to look at it that way.
Mm-hmm. And not only that, I mean, they were a very disparate group, but they were a challenging group. Lorenzo, is it Lorenzo who got into fights all the time, and one of them was in gangs?
Mm-hmm. That's true.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's true. He because of his unusual appearance, he would be the subject of being picked on, and so he was a target. And of course, he wanted to defend himself, so he would get into these fights. And he was starting to realize that this path he was choosing was not getting him very far. And he did realize that he had the ability to go further in life. And so he wanted to spend more time in robotics because he felt like it was helping them get there. And so he kind of curtailed his extracurricular fighting so that he could spend more time doing extracurricular robots.
Right. And this was Lorenzo we're talking about, right?
Lorenzo, yes.
Right. And at one point, he almost got expelled from school, and I think it was the principal who decided that keeping him in school would at least get him involved in the robotics team and might give him a future.
Yeah, the principal had high confidence in our program and keeping kids busy and getting them motivated to do something. And so he saw that Lorenzo was interested, and if we could pull him in more and focus him on the things he needed to do and distract him from the things he wasn't supposed to do, that it was probably going to be more helpful to him than if he expelled him. So yeah.
So how did you pull together these four very different boys into a winning robotics team?
Well, you have to keep in mind, as you mentioned, you read the book. So when we first did this, we had already had the robotics program for 2 years, and we were still kind of getting our feet wet, so to speak, and learning how to do this. When Alan and I came across this workshop that was being offered by the National Science Foundation in Santa Barbara. So he and I attended this, and we basically were broken into groups by, groups of 4, and we had to build, using parts we got from Home Depot, a robot that could compete against the other teacher groups. So at the end of the week, when we were done with the competition, they said, wasn't that fun? Well, we're going to hold a competition and you can get your students involved in this kind of activity. So we decided, that following year to go ahead and do this with our team, but we were doing it as a test case, like an exploratory thing. So, we got a small group of kids, and we were going there mostly just to take notes and see how it went, and find out and talk to more advanced teams on how can we improve ourselves. We weren't going in with the mindset that we were going in to compete, but nevertheless, we didn't want to be embarrassed or humiliated. So we did the best we could, but our expectations were exceedingly low. And to make that even more safe, we decided that, let's enter in the university category, because then, if we finish last, which we're probably going to do, no one's going to think anything of it because we're the high school team. And if we beat even just one college, that would be a great accomplishment for us. I mean, that would be a goal, is let's just not get last. So it kind of took the pressure off, I think, and that maybe that kind of fostered an environment of higher risk taking that we might not have done if we were worried about winning. So that's kind of how we got into the competition. So we asked 2 of the kids which were in the robotics program, which was Lorenzo and Christian, and Oscar and Luis were in my marine science class I was teaching at the time, the senior marine research. And I gave them the option. I said, you can help us build this underwater robot for this competition, or you can do the curriculum that I have set aside for the regular senior science, marine science students. And so they opted to do the robotics project, thinking it was going to be, more fun and less work. Well, while it was more fun, it definitely wasn't less work. But they liked it so much, it didn't matter. And so that's how we kind of formed the team.
Great. And so tell me about the competition that year.
Well, the competition is an underwater robotics competition where you have to accomplish a series of tasks. One of them is measuring temperature underwater. One is collecting a sample of a liquid while underwater. And this was done by having a liquid that was a saline solution. So it was more dense. So if they put the container in the pool, it didn't drift out into the pool. It stayed inside the container, and they food colored it red. So the judges could tell if you extracted the fluid or not. Then there was also visual things that you had to find and identify and show the judges on your monitor, and things that you had to retrieve and bring back to the surface. So it was a whole series of different tasks, including measuring distance underwater, both the depth and the length of the object that you were looking at. So you had all these, and this was the underwater portion of the competition. Then you had the written tech report that you had to turn in, and an oral presentation. So you had 3 categories of where the points were totaled together to come up with an overall winner.
Mm. And what were you feeling as you were going into the competition?
Well, the first part of the competition was the underwater portion. And, you know, they blew air across the top of the water so teams couldn't see how everybody was doing. The tetherman, person handing the cable in the water, was not allowed to talk and tell anything to the drivers who were shielded from the pool. They were behind like a black curtain. And so, you know, to make the tetherman not be tempted, they blew air across the top. So even he couldn't see what was going on. And so all we could see is the scores that were coming up, or teams panicking because the robot, you know, had flooded or imploded or whatever. And so little by little, as the competition unfolded, we thought, gee, we're not that bad. We ended up, you know, we did a lot of the tasks. We didn't do all of them. We did do something that no one else was able to do, and that was extract the fluid from the fluid. So that was pretty exciting. But at the end of the day, you know, MIT was #1 underwater, Cape Fear Community College was #2, and we were #3. So by that time, we thought, wow, this is fantastic. We weren't even trying to do anything, and we beat the whole field practically, except for these 2. So at that point, if everything ended, we'd have been thrilled. We still had the oral presentation and the written report that needed to be judged. So we were hoping that, you know, if everything went perfect, that we might finish 4th or 3rd. So that was our outlook going into the last 2 portions of the competition.
And the book talks about the oral portion, that there was a moment when everyone was a little nervous that maybe Luis wouldn't be able to contribute as much as they would have liked him to.
Yeah, Luis wasn't very talkative. He was kind of like the silent giant, but he was gentle, and he did answer you usually in 1-word responses, you know. So it was hard to tell how much he was absorbing. And, you know, we'd question and quiz him, and he would give us the answers. But, you know, there was always this fear that the judge might ask something that he didn't know or couldn't interpolate from the information he had. So there was a question, you know, whether or not he would be a weak link on the team during the oral presentation. So, yeah, that was kind of a thing that the team was worried about.
Yeah. And in the end, he came through really well, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it seemed like, you know, I wasn't in the room, so I can't tell you. I'm only hearing it secondhand. But from the judges and from the kids' point of view, they said they did fantastic, that there was no question that they couldn't answer. The judges were amazed that they knew the metric system, because I guess most teams weren't very comfortable with it. And the other thing was just the fact that they totally had an understanding of their robot. They knew everything that went into it. And they didn't use a PowerPoint when they did the presentation. We didn't want the kids to bring in some technology and then have it waste their time because they couldn't get it hooked up. I mean, you saw how long it took us to get this Google Hangouts set up. We didn't want that. They only had a certain amount of time, and we didn't want them, you know, messing around with stuff that wasn't working. So we just kept it low tech. The other thing we wanted is we wanted the judges to have eye contact with them, because we think a lot of times in day-to-day actions with humans that we tend to put technology between us rather than, you know, going face to face. So we gave them a little flip chart that had maybe a little diagram on the front, and on the back there was maybe 3 or 4 big bullet points for them to look at so they can remember what to say during their presentation. And so the judges even asked, you know, how come you guys didn't use PowerPoint? And Christian was kind of a smart aleck because he likes to know everything. He said, well, you know, PowerPoint's for people who don't have anything to say. So in a way, he was hinting at that distraction that PowerPoint can be, and it takes you away from the person. And so, of course, he could have said it nicer, but I think he made his point.
Sure. And how many teams were in the competition that year?
I think there's close to 20 teams. I don't remember the exact number. It may have been 18, something like that. So it wasn't like, it wasn't a huge number, but you know, we were the only high school in the university category.
Yes, you were. And in the end, you came out on top?
Yeah, they during the awards ceremony, they announced a judge's special award, and that was the first award they gave out. And we were kind of thinking that was maybe a pity award, that we weren't winning anything else, and they felt bad for the poor high school kids from, you know, the ghetto. So let's give him a judge's award. Later, we reconsidered, and we think that it was for the use of a feminine hygiene product that we used to stop the leak in our robot. So that's what we're saying it is now. But at the time, we felt like maybe that, we didn't win anything else. Then we won the Elegance and Design Award because we were the only team that had all our wiring on the robot internal to the frame. So our robot was very clean looking, even though it was not a very attractive looking robot. Some design aspects of it were very clever. We also had the smallest tether, the control line. We put our batteries on the robot. Everyone else had their batteries on the surface. So they had a mess of cables going into the water, and we basically had an Ethernet cable, and that was it. So then we won the technical writing. Well, by this time, I thought that someone had added up the scores wrong, because how is it possible that you could outwrite MIT in a technical manual? And so I started thinking, wow, this has to be a mistake. And then they were announcing the overall winners, and they announced, Cape Fear Community College as third place. And we're like, wow, okay, so they were second, now they're third. They dropped down one. Then they announced MIT as second place. And we're like, wow. So they were first, they dropped to second. And then we're thinking, who the heck is first? Because we didn't think it was us. We thought, well, we must have got fourth or fifth. And then they announced, Carl Hayden as first place, and we were stunned. We couldn't believe it. So it turns out later we found out that between the oral presentation and the technical report, we beat MIT by 1 point. One point is what made the difference. And so that was a shock. And when we got back to the table, I was shaking, and I asked all the kids to put their hands out, and our hands were all shaking. So we said, we better sit down because we don't know how to handle this. We didn't expect anything. So we don't know what to do now. This is no man's land. It was the furthest thing from our mind was that we could win this thing.
Yeah. Well, that must have been quite a moment for all of you.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. And since then, we've always tried to emulate some of the things that I guess we accidentally found out in the course of trying to put this team together. And it's been highly successful. I mean, we've had numerous competitions now where we have come out on top. And so, I don't want to say we've tapped into a secret, but we do have a formula that seems to be working here.
Well, that team really does seem to have spearheaded or been the start of a very long and successful program at your school. What has the robotics team meant to your school?
Well, it's a huge symbol of recognition. I mean, you go across the country, and if you wear, a Falcon Robotics T-shirt, some of the staff that have relatives in other parts of the country, when they wear that shirt and they go out, in the community, there are people that say, hey, isn't that the team that beat MIT in that underwater competition, or, whatever the latest thing is that we've managed to get in the news for. So yeah, it's been huge for the school. I mean, we have kids that come from outside our attendance zone just because they want to be part of the robotics program. So that's a great, kudos for us. The other thing is just a recognition we've gotten from the robotics community in general. One of the awards we've won is called the Chairman's Award. And it's an award given by US First Robotics, and FIRST is an acronym for Inspiration and Recognition of Science and Technology. That's given to a role model team, someone who's done something to affect change in their community, maybe the state legislature, the culture of the school. And now, while it's, not possible, or maybe it's possible, to change everybody at the school, we've definitely helped change the culture that exists at the school, where the number of students going to college has increased. The number of students that are getting scholarships has increased. And there's a direct tie into many of those students are also on the robotics team. There's kind of a joke that at ASU, if you find a Latina that's in engineering, you should ask her what year she graduated from Carl Hayden, because we kind of seem to have a monopoly on that. So yeah, I mean, we see that we've made a difference, and it can't, one program and one or two teachers can't change the entire population of the school. But now the school has an identity associated with it besides the traditional inner city stereotype. We're also known as that robotics school. So that can only be a positive thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Absolutely. And it's clear that your program really is making a difference in the lives of your students and in the culture of the school. But in reading the book, it's clear that the book is really about the experience of undocumented students in the United States as much as it's about robotics.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we tell people, and First also, says this a lot, it's not about the robot. It's about working with people and learning how to solve problems in a creative way. And I think that's what a lot of the students get, because we brain it into them as well. So that when they were in college at ASU and Proposition 300 hit, instead of just lying down and taking it, they tried to mobilize and figure out a way to solve the problem. And their solution was, people aren't aware of these kind of students, undocumented students, and the plight that they go through and the situation they're in. So our best thing is, we need to educate the public. So some of our former members, team members who are attending ASU, formed the Arizona Dream Act Coalition. And they've been one of the leading groups that's been out there advocating for passage of the Dream Act with state legislatures and U.S. senators and U.S. congressmen. They've done everything from visiting when dignitaries come here to even traveling to D.C. and lobbying that way. And one of the leaders, one of the presidents of the Arizona Dream Act Coalition is Dulce Matus, who was also recognized by Time Magazine in 2012 as one of the top 100 most influential people in the world. And this is because of her undying quest to get politicians, including President Obama, which on 2 occasions she managed to grab his hand in, I guess, a public, what do you call it, handshaking line, and for 2 minutes talk to him about how he had the authority to do an executive action and pass the deferred action. And so her group, along with some other groups, really convinced President Obama to do that. So as you can see, that has nothing to do with robotics, but it does have everything to do with solving a problem. And they really believe that robotics has changed their life and made them proactive in their lives. And I think that's what they've taken out of it. Now, unfortunately, that puts us in the spotlight for immigration, because we do have students at our school that fit that situation, as do many schools. But whether we want it or not, we've become a focal point on what's happening in immigration in Arizona in education. So like you said, our robotics program is not just about the robots.
Yes, absolutely. And it's taken your students to the White House. It took you to the White House.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, several times actually. Once was for U.S. First Robotics. We were representing them as an ambassador. Another one was for another organization, and then the last one was for the last two actually were for the documentary Underwater Dreams. We were there for the White House Science Fair, and then a week later we were there for a screening of the documentary with White House officials. And we were also part of a roundtable discussion on where education can help, or how the culture in the United States in the area of education could help get more Latinos and females into STEM fields. And so that was the point of the roundtable. And then to cap it off, they showed the documentary. So yeah, we've had a lot of brush-ins with the White House.
Yes. It must be very gratifying for you to see what's happened in the past 12 or 13 years since that rocky start with your robotics team back in 2002, to see where it's gone now, and what it's done, not just, as we're talking about, not just for robotics, but for the students in your school.
Well, like I said, if you read the book, you noticed that at first there wasn't any publicity coming. So I thought, well, that's status quo. You do something good, no one cares, but you have a fight on campus, the whole world wants to pay attention. So that's the way it seemed to be going. But because of what Josh Davis did by writing that Wired article and getting the world to pay attention to what was going on, it changed everything. And then the ensuing 10 years with the movie deals and whatnot, before they finally sat down and made the movie, it's been phenomenal. I keep pinching myself to think if this is real. It is a little bizarre, though, that all this celebrity stuff is going on, and it's 10 years ago that this stuff happened. So that part's a little strange, but it's welcomed.
Yes, and you're still teaching at the same school.
I'm still teaching at Carl Hayden High School as we speak.
I see that. Well, Fredi, it's been fascinating talking to you. You have a great story. We're looking forward to hearing more about it, reading the book, and watching both the movies, Spare Parts and Underwater Dreams. And we appreciate your taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today.
Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to being at your conference.
Great, thanks.
Okay,
And
take care.
yeah. And thank you for joining us. If you'd like to visit this Hangout again, or if you'd like to view any of our other ASCA Hangouts, please go to schoolcounselor.org/hangouts. And until next time, please remember, life is a journey. Enjoy the ride.